Hello, my name is Cara Miller and welcome to Trailblazers, a celebration of people of colour who have achieved extraordinary things. Today I'm speaking with Precious Williams, a world-renowned journalist, a celebrity interviewer and most recently, author. She has tackled subjects as diverse as gun crime and homosexuality in hip-hop, and she's interviewed almost every celebrity I can think of, from Beyonce to P. Diddy, from Nina Simone to Natalie Portman. Welcome, Precious.
Hi, thank you for having me.
Now, your mother was a Nigerian princess.
That's right.
That's right. So how was your childhood so different from hers? Why was it?
Well, I was one of the, I think, maybe 10,000 children in Britain of African parents who ended up privately fostered. Yes. So it was a practice that went on in the 60s and 70s where parents would foster their children up very cheaply, usually to white families in places like Essex and Sussex. And it was like a sort of cheap way of finding childcare. So that's where I ended up as a baby while my mother worked. But I spent my whole childhood in that environment.
So, and who was your foster mother? Who was the person taking care of you?
She was a fairly elderly white lady who lived in West Sussex, and she had decided to take me in because she was in love with a book called Uncle Tom's Cabin, and that's sort of all she knew about black people. So she'd read that book, and there's a character in it called Topsy, and she wanted her own Topsy. So that's how the whole thing came about. So it sounds almost like a joke,
but it wasn't for you.
Not really, no. It had its funny moments, but.
Was the Nigeria you visited when you were 6 what you expected?
It was nothing like it. When I was told I was going to Nigeria, it felt like a death sentence. My foster family was sort of, giving me special meals and buying me stuff, because it was almost as though I was going to my death, going to Nigeria for that Christmas. And I remember on the plane there, I was given some food, and I actually said to my mother, "Is this lion meat?" Because I thought Africa is all like lions and tigers chasing you, cannibals cooking each other in cauldrons, and people starving to death, and naked.
Naked.
And when I arrived, I couldn't believe that people were wearing clothes. I mean, it was just nothing like, I couldn't believe I was in Africa. I thought, wow, there are shops and there are like people in clothes.
And when you got to, speaking of the houses, when you got to the compound,
right.
Was it what you expected?
Not at all, no. I mean, there are sort of 2 towns in eastern Nigeria that my family are from, and in one of them there's like a huge house, much nicer than the council house I lived in with my foster family, and it was just all quite glamorous, cocktail parties, swimming pools, loads and loads of family. I have a great-grandfather who had 36 wives, so there's all the offspring of that, all in these towns.
He was a chief, wasn't he? Yeah,
he calls it a chief or king, he's called that interchangeably, yeah.
Yes. I mean, you are a princess.
But in the foster family, that was moot. Because, I would sort of say, hey, my great-grandfather's a king, I saw him in a book, and I would be told, yeah, likely story.
And yet you are.
I am.
Do you feel it now?
Definitely more now than when I was a ragged little child.
Yeah. And at that time in your life, even when you were in West Sussex, when you saw black people, did you feel a sense of, oh, I belong there, or did you feel a little bit of distance?
I think there was a huge amount of confusion when I was small, because I think when I was like 3 and 4, I would actually cry if a black person came too close to me. Apart from my mother, I don't think I realised I was black.
Yes. And what did you see when you saw those black people coming towards you?
Well, I sort of had the foster family who were all white and very working class. That was sort of my everyday reality. And then when I saw my birth family, everyone was very glamorous, and they seemed louder than the people I was using, and colourful. Like they would show up in traditional Nigerian clothes. And it was just too much. It sort of overwhelmed my senses. So I would just want to run from them. They would be sort of very physical as well, wanting to hug me and,
You have written a memoir, a very beautiful memoir. I've had the pleasure of reading it, so thank you. And
thank you.
It moved me hugely. For someone watching this show today, they're going to be saying, well, at least you had a nice home. You had a home, but
right.
What were you missing? Or you had a home, but what did you have that you didn't want?
I guess because Midhurst, the place where I ended up, is a very small town, probably about 3,000 people. 2,999 of them white, and then there's me. And my foster family they felt that they were the most liberal, progressive people in the world in terms of race, because they had me and also a series of short-term black foster children. But they almost taught us self-hate, because they just didn't understand. I mean, their solution to everything was, we're all the same underneath. We don't mind that you're black.
Yes.
You know, as a white family, they couldn't understand how that could hurt a child, obviously,
Yes.
because they're the majority. And so I think it was sort of born of ignorance, really, just not being able to make me feel proud of my race or even really understand what being a black woman in Britain meant at all. They would just sort of deny it and say, you're the same as us. Don't we love you? You know.
I remember a bit in the book when Auntie Sue, I remember this because Auntie Sue said, boy, you know, with hair like that, you can't be happy. Awful hair.
Yeah.
And then what did you say to that?
I mean, I think I'm about 14 in that scene, or
Yeah.
15, and I sort of turned around and said, well, you know, white people are allowed to love their hair, and why can't I? And I was called an insolent little cow.
Oh, precious. I mean, by the way, up until that point, you weren't so quote-unquote rebellious. Leading up to age 13, 14, you were actually buying into all of that.
Yeah,
you know?
absolutely. So that was a turning point, you know, sort of in my mid-teens, where I suddenly thought, well, hang on a minute, am I not okay as well? You know, sort of I was really very much encouraged to sort of aspire to be as Caucasian as I could, you know. Even my name, actually, Precious, they wouldn't really sort of let me call myself Precious in the family I grew up in, because it's very ethnic, I suppose, they thought. So Anita, which is my middle name, is what I went by. And they would sort of say about my name, oh, it's an awful name, isn't it, you poor little thing? Just like they say, you've got awful hair, haven't you? Let's try and make it straight. So that was their way of trying to make me as like them as possible. But it's also quite damaging, I think, psychologically.
Yes, hugely. In the book, I know that other relatives in the foster family were not as warm as Nan.
I think she's quite a colourful character.
Yes.
Yeah, and she had quite a colourful life herself. Yeah.
I mean, do you feel, now looking back, do you feel she wasn't always kind? Do you feel love for her? Do you feel love for your mum? I mean, how does that work years later?
I guess I feel love for all of them. But I can recognise that the childhood was like basically horrific, but that I think pretty much everyone meant well.
Yes.
You know, even part of my mother's motivation for sending me to a white family was so I would speak English like a white person, as she called it, because she felt that would get me further in life. So to this day, she thinks it's a good thing simply because I speak English well. And I remember saying to her, you know, couldn't you have got me elocution lessons? if that was your sole goal.
Man, Precious. You remained with your foster mother, didn't you? You didn't
Yeah.
go back to your mother? Your Nigerian
No,
mother.
my mother's intention was to get me back when I was 10, when I was old enough to go to boarding school, which she tried to do, but by then my foster mother wasn't giving me up. She thought of me as her child. So they battled it out in court, and my foster mother won.
You stayed? Yeah, you didn't really stay, did you?
No, I mean, the older I got, the less I wanted to be in that town. And, you know, I became obsessed with just being around more people who looked like me. I'd got over my fear of black people by then. So at the age of 16, I dropped out of A-levels. Actually, no, I was older than 16. I was about 17 and took off to London.
And yet, when you finished said A-levels, you went to Oxford.
Yeah, and then I took a postgraduate course in journalism. During that course, I remember we were told by our tutor, don't expect to be writing for the Times or Marie Claire anytime soon. You know, you'll start at a regional paper. And I when she said that, I thought, right, I'm going to call the Times and Marie Claire. And I did. I just like literally left that college and called them and got an assignment from the Times within probably like 2 months of leaving the course.
You had this great career in London. I mean, you were doing the whole Marie Claire, the whole Telegraph, the whole Vogue thing in various different parts of the world. Then you went to New York.
Yeah.
What drew you to become a celebrity interviewer?
Well, I think some of it stemmed from my childhood and teenage years when music became more and more important to me. I was obsessed, especially with hip-hop, when that was sort of first coming out, in England anyway, in the early 80s and mid-80s. And that was kind of like my link to black culture, really. That's my only link. Like, you know, I had this huge record collection. So then I sort of thought it would be amazing to actually meet these people. I mean, it sounded like the complete dream, but I thought I'm going to try and make it happen. So the first one was Nina Simone, and I saw a poster saying that she was performing in London, and I somehow got hold of her manager's phone number and said, you know, hi, my name's Precious Williams, I'd like to interview Nina Simone. I mean, this, you know, he should have just put the phone down. But
These interviews seem to